Hello, and welcome to Soothing Pod Sleep Stories. I am Michael, and tonight we will follow the secret footsteps of a sleepless princess who slips beyond palace walls each night, seeking quiet, kindness, and the forgotten wonders of her kingdom. In hidden bakeries, starlit boats, and lantern-lit hills, she discovers not just the world beyond, but the dream waiting gently within. Before we begin our journey tonight, let's take time to relax and let go of the stresses of the day. Allow your body to sink into the mattress beneath you. Here and now, there are no obligations, no to-do lists. By simply lying in bed with your eyes closed, you are already giving your body nourishing rest. Night has fallen. Let the noise of the world slip away now, like a silk ribbon loosening from the wrist. The day is done, and there is nothing more you need to chase, nothing more you need to hold. Here in the hush between moments, the world softens. Breathe in slowly, deeply, as if drawing in moonlight. And as you exhale, feel your shoulders settle. Feel your breath fall like a feather. Let your hands rest. Let your thoughts float like dandelion seeds on the wind. There is space here, soft and wide and quiet, for you to drift. Now imagine a land far away, where the stars shine a little brighter and time moves like water. In that distant kingdom, golden spires shimmer in the dark, and the palace stands silent, cloaked in velvet shadows. All seems still, yet beneath that stillness a story is stirring. A girl in a tower is wide awake. She's not restless with fear, nor with sorrow, but with a longing she cannot name. A gentle ache for something real, something forgotten, something hers. And so, wrapped in silence, she rises. Tonight, the story begins not with a crown or a throne, but with a quiet step on stone. A cloak slipping over a gown, a heartbeat in the dark. The world beyond the palace is waiting, and so are the dreams that do not come when summoned, but find us when we wander far from where we began. Close your eyes, let your thoughts grow still, and follow her. In the heart of a faraway kingdom stood a palace of pale stone, luminous under moonlight, with high towers crowned in silver, and gardens that bloomed even in winter. By day, it was a place of color and ceremony. Crimson carpets, cascading violins, courtiers dressed like jeweled birds. Banners danced in the breeze, and the scent of roses trailed behind every passing noble. But by night, the palace changed. The colors faded into shadow. The musicians packed away their instruments. Even the fountains, once playful, fell into silence. The corridors grew long and echoing. Footsteps sounded too loud. Doors closed a little too firmly. And in the highest room of the tallest spire, a princess could not sleep. Her chamber was a marvel of beauty, the ceiling painted like a summer sky, the walls lined with books in velvet bindings, the fireplace carved with ivy and wolves, and her bed. It was gently layered with silks and soft furs, feather light and perfumed with lilac. The air smelled faintly of beeswax and lavender oil. Everything had been designed to bring rest, but rest would not come. Every night she lay there still as a doll, her hands folded gently over her chest. Her maids had long stopped offering remedies. No more spice milk or stories in hushed voices, no more sleepy teas or harp strings strummed to silence. The truth was, nothing helped. Not warm baths or rare feathers or whispered prayers. The palace, for all its grandeur, did not make her feel safe. It made her feel distant, as though she were always watching her own life from behind a glass. She had tried to explain this once, carefully, hesitantly, to the queen, but her mother only smoothed her hair and said, "You are tired because your mind is too full. Try not to think so much." The king, upon hearing it, simply said, "You are lucky to have such a life. Do not waste your blessings with doubt." So she stopped explaining, but every night when the candles were snuffed and the guards took their posts, that same ache returned. It wasn't fear, not sadness either, just a hollow space that opened in her chest and whispered that something was missing, something important. She would lie in the dark, eyes open, trying to hear what the silence wanted to tell her. She imagined lives she'd never lived, as a baker's daughter, a shepherd's friend, a girl who could walk down a street unnoticed. She imagined laughter not learned from tutors, touch not bound by etiquette. Sometimes the ache sharpened into longing. Other times it dulled into stillness. Until one night the ache moved her feet. She rose from the bed like a shadow rising from stone, her breath held tight in her chest. She crossed to the wardrobe, pulled free a plain wool cloak, and slipped it over her linen nightgown. No jewels, no crown, just soft shoes and quiet resolve. She opened her door without sound and walked the silent corridor with practiced ease. Past the marble busts, the long mirrors that showed her only as she was taught to be, graceful, composed, alone. The guards at the end of the corridor stood still as statues, their eyes fixed forward, their minds elsewhere. She passed them like a whisper, through a narrow door half hidden behind an old tapestry, a door once used by servants in generations past. Most had forgotten it existed. She had not. The stairs beyond wound down in a narrow spiral, cool and damp. Moss grew in the corners. A single torch burned low. At the bottom, a heavy wooden gate creaked gently in its hinges, untouched by time. She hesitated. Beyond that door, the kingdom stretched wide and unknown. not as a map in her lessons, but as a living place, full of breath and dust and distant voices. She touched the gate and opened it. The wind greeted her with a soft chill. The city spread below, scattered with flickering lanterns, rooftops stacked like puzzles, and trees swaying in moonlit groves. She smelled smoke and bread and earth. She heard a dog bark once in the distance, then a lull again, the deep, hushed kind of quiet that belongs only to the sleeping world. Her breath caught. She had never seen it like this, not from behind a window, not from a carriage, but here, with her own feet on the stone, her own heart racing, and for the first time in a long while, she felt awake in a way that had nothing to do with sleeplessness. The stars above her blinked as if curious. She stepped through the gate, and no one, not the queen with her plans, not the king with his rules, not even the palace maids with their soft hands and worried glances, noticed the princess was gone, not gone forever, just wandering. The city was softer at night. Gone were the carts and clatter, the shouting of vendors and the clinking of noble boots. In their place came gentle things, the flutter of curtains, the hush of a broom sweeping a doorstep, a cat winding its way over roof tiles. It was not silent, no, but it breathed and it listened. The princess moved carefully through the cobbled streets, keeping to the shadows of ivy-draped walls. Her cloak brushed the edges of flower boxes and old wooden doors. She had no destination in mind, only a wish to keep walking. Then she saw it. At the edge of a quiet square stood a narrow house, with crooked shutters and ivy climbing its bricks like lace. In its window, a single candle burned. It was a simple thing, nothing grand or golden, just a stub of wax in a dish, its flame leaning toward the glass as if trying to peer out. But something about it felt kind, familiar, though she had never seen it before. She crossed the street and stood below the window, listening. Inside, someone was humming, low and steady, with the gentle rhythm of someone who hummed not for others but for themselves. A man's voice, worn, warm. She crept closer, peering through a gap in the curtain. Inside sat an old man, bent over a wooden bench, surrounded by tiny tools and a dozen pairs of shoes in various stages of wear. He worked slowly, carefully pressing a sole into place, his hands steady despite the tremble in his shoulders. The room smelled of leather and wood smoke. There was a kettle steaming on a small stove and a thin cat asleep on the windowsill. The princess stood very still. There was nothing remarkable about the moment, no magic, no danger, no discovery, and yet she felt her breath slow. The ache in her chest grew quieter. The man didn't notice her at first. He kept humming and stitching, stopping now and then to sip from a chipped blue mug. But after a while he looked up, as though sensing something. His eyes met hers through the glass. He didn't startle, he simply smiled. A smile, not of surprise, but of welcome. She hesitated, then knocked softly on the door. It opened with a quiet creak. The cat lifted its head. The man looked at her with eyes like old smoke and said, "You're out late, little nightbird." She smiled. "I couldn't sleep." He nodded. "Neither can I, not since my daughter moved away. The silence gets heavy sometimes." The princess stepped inside, drawn by the warmth of the room. She kept her hood low. She didn't want to lie, but she didn't want to be recognized either. Here she wasn't royalty. She was just a girl in a cloak. The man didn't ask questions. He poured her a cup of tea and set out a chair beside his bench. They sat together, saying little. He quietly showed her how he mended the seam of a shoe, how the thread must be pulled just tight enough, never forced. She listened, her hands folded in her lap, her breath softened. There was a comfort in his quiet, not the polished silence of a throne room, but the gentle silence that comes from being accepted without explanation. After a while, she asked, "Do you miss her?" The man paused. "Every day. But when I fix shoes, I think of her feet still walking somewhere. That helps." The princess blinked slowly. She imagined all the shoes in the castle, stiff, jeweled, made to look impressive but not to move. With quiet wonder, she realized she had never seen anyone treat them with care like this, not as vessels of journeys, but as something beloved. When she rose to leave, he didn't ask her name. He only said, "If the night finds you again, you're welcome here." She stepped back into the street, the candle still flickering behind her, and for the first time in years she felt something light settle inside her chest. Not sleep, but something close. The sky was beginning to pale, though the sun had not yet crested the hills. A cool breeze threaded through the alleyways, carrying with it the scent of something warm, something rising. The princess followed the scent as if it were a ribbon tugging at her hand, past shuttered shops and stone fountains, past a church bell that hadn't yet stirred, until she reached a low building with smoke curling gently from its chimney. A bakery. Its windows were fogged with warmth, and the heavy wooden door stood slightly ajar. From within came the soft thuds of dough hitting flour, the clink of metal trays, and laughter. Not the kind that echoed off marble walls or followed carefully timed jests, but the unpolished kind, sleepy, honest. She stepped inside quietly. The room was glowing with the golden haze of firelight. Racks of rising loaves lined the walls, and bowls of flour dusted every surface like fresh snow. Two sisters, one tall and quiet, the other plump and chatty, moved like dancers through the room, kneading and shaping, brushing butter onto crusts with soft bristles. They looked up when the princess entered, surprised but not alarmed. "Customer or company?" asked the taller one, brushing flour from her brow. "Just walking," the princess replied softly, keeping her hood low. The shorter one grinned. "Well, if your feet led you here, they must have known better than your head. Sit. You can keep the bench warm while we finish the morning rounds." And so she did. The bench by the oven was warm and worn smooth by time. She folded her hands and watched the rhythm of kneading, the hiss of the oven door, the occasional burst of laughter between sisters who had done this 1,000 mornings and still found joy in it. "City's still asleep," the quiet sister said, shaping a braid of dough. "We like it best now. Feels like the world belongs to us." The princess nodded. She'd never seen a morning like this. Not from a balcony, not with attendants placing slippers at her feet. There was no audience here, no urgency. Only the scent of cinnamon and yeast and the press of steam against the windows. "Would you like to try?" the chatty sister asked, offering a lump of dough. The princess blinked, then nodded. Her fingers sank into the warm, pliant surface, clumsy at first. The sisters watched with amused patience as she copied their movements. Roll, fold, press, until she found a rhythm of her own. The dough left traces on her hands and sleeves. Her cheeks flushed from the oven's heat. For a moment she forgot the palace entirely. They worked in comfortable silence. Birds began to stir in the trees outside, and the lanterns in the square flickered out one by one. When the first tray of bread came out, golden and steaming, the sisters tore a small piece from one of the ends and handed it to her. "Best when it's still too hot," the taller one said. The crust cracked softly beneath her fingers, and the inside was warm, impossibly soft, with the faint sweetness of honey. She took a bite. It tasted like kindness, like something that had been made for no other reason than to nourish and share. "You've got flour on your nose," the younger sister said, and laughed again. The princess laughed too, surprised by the sound of it. Light and real, rising up from somewhere she hadn't felt in a long time. When she stood to leave, the sisters handed her a roll wrapped in a cloth napkin. "For the road," they said. "Everyone needs a piece of something warm to carry." She tucked it gently into her cloak. Outside, the sky was shifting, still sleepy, but awake. She turned to look back at the bakery. The sisters had already returned to their work, their laughter floating through the open door like morning bird song. The ache in her chest felt softer now, like it had been kneaded smooth, not gone, but gentler. And that was enough to keep walking. By the time the princess left the bakery behind, the world had begun to stretch and yawn. Light touched the rooftops like fingertips brushing velvet. Smoke rose from chimneys in quiet curls, and roosters called to one another across sleepy courtyards. She wandered beyond the stone streets, past a crumbling wall where ivy grew thick and wild. Beyond it, the land softened. Fields and thickets, stitched together with fences, dotted with sleeping sheep and swaying grasses, still wet with dew. It was quieter here. No bells, no footsteps, only bird song and the rustle of wind through trees. She was about to turn back when she heard a sound, small, sharp whimper. She froze. It came again, faint and ragged. Not human, not bird. She followed it, parting branches carefully until she reached a clearing lined with tall grass and thistles. In the center, caught in a thin wire snare, was a fox. Its red coat was muddied, and one paw bent awkwardly where the snare had tightened. It struggled, but not wildly, its strength nearly gone. Eyes like polished amber watched her warily. And kneeling beside the creature was a boy, not much older than she, perhaps 16 or 17, with a tangle of hay-colored hair and a shirt mended so many times the patches looked like a mosaic. His hands moved slowly as he spoke, not to her, but to the fox. "You're not dying tonight," he whispered gently. "Not after a night this quiet." He glanced up, startled to see her standing there, but he didn't rise. His gaze held hers for a beat, then returned to the snare. "I didn't set it," he said, "but if I don't get it loose right, he'll lose the leg." The princess stepped forward, cautious, watching the fox as it trembled. "May I help?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Hold just there, not tight. Let him feel your calm." Her fingers pressed lightly against the fox's fur, soft, damp, warm. She could feel its rapid heartbeat, the fear just beneath the surface. But she did as the boy said. She steadied herself. She breathed slowly. He worked the wire free with steady hands. When it snapped loose, the fox didn't bolt. It stayed for a moment, blinking up at the two of them, then limped into the tall grass and vanished without a sound. The princess exhaled. The boy sat back, wiping his brow. "I think he'll make it. Might take a few nights, but he'll mend. They're tougher than they look." She studied his face. Dirt smudged his jaw. His eyes were gray, like the sky before rain. There was no trace of recognition in them, no bow, no curious glance toward her cloak, just quiet. "You've done that before," she said softly. He shrugged. "Sometimes animals get stuck. Most folks don't hear them." They sat in the grass, the silence between them, peaceful rather than strained. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Me neither," he replied. "Too many thoughts, so I walk the fields. Helps me sort what's mine to worry about and what's not." She looked out across the meadow, where mist still hugged the earth, and the fox. He smiled faintly. I guess he couldn't sleep either. For a while they said nothing. The breeze danced through the grass. The sky softened from pale to pearl. When she finally stood to go, the boy didn't ask her name. He only said, "If you see him again, don't be afraid. He remembers kindness." So do people, she thought, but did not say it. She walked back to the path with the scent of earth on her hands and a quiet steadiness in her chest. And somewhere in the tall grass, a fox watched her go. The next night she returned to the gate. The palace was unchanged, quiet halls, polished silence, the faint scent of roses lingering in the stone. But within the princess, something had shifted. The ache that once felt heavy had become a whisper, pulling her gently outward past golden ceremony, past sleep that never came. She slipped into the night with practiced ease. This time, she walked farther, beyond the city's edge, where the cobbled streets softened into dust and gravel. The scent of salt brushed the wind. Somewhere ahead, the river widened and turned silver beneath the moon. She followed it until the land gave way to a quiet harbor. It was a modest place, a curve of wooden docks and rocking boats, lanterns swaying gently from hooks. Most vessels were still, their sails tied down, and hulls creaking with the rhythm of the tide. But one small boat bobbed gently near the end of the pier, its lantern still lit, and beside it stood a woman with hair like sea smoke, coiling and wild. Her face was lined, her hands knotted from years of rope and oar. She looked up as the princess approached. "You looking for someone?" the woman asked. "No," the princess said, glancing at the boat. "Just walking." The woman tilted her head, then motioned. "Come aboard. The river's quiet tonight, quieter than most folk ever are." The princess hesitated only a moment before stepping onto the wooden planks. The boat swayed gently beneath her feet, not unsettling, but soothing, like being rocked in a cradle. They drifted slowly into the open water. Neither of them spoke for a while. The oars moved in slow circles. Moonlight rippled across the surface like silk. Around them, the world seemed to hold its breath. The trees on the banks, the reeds, even the stars, all hushed. The princess sat on a crate near the bow, listening to the lapping of water against the hull. "You come from the city?" the woman asked at last. "Yes," the princess said. "You don't speak like it." The princess smiled faintly. "I don't belong anywhere, I think." The woman nodded, as if that made perfect sense. Sometimes the river helps you figure out what part of you floats and what part sinks. The boat rocked softly. A heron lifted from the reeds and disappeared into the dark. "Do you come out here every night?" the princess asked. The woman shrugged. "When I miss the sea, when the tide inside me pulls. I don't always need to go far, just enough to feel like I'm not anchored too tightly." The words settled over the princess like a quilt. She let her fingers trail over the edge of the boat, skimming the cool water. She didn't realize her eyes had closed until she felt the boat shift, not sharply, but like a breath being drawn. She opened her eyes. The moon was lower now. The stars had thinned. The current had turned, and within her, something had eased. A thread that had been pulled taut now loosened. Not enough to sleep, not yet, but enough to breathe a little deeper. "Thank you," she said softly. The woman gave her a crooked smile. Dreams find their way on water. You just have to float long enough to catch one. The boat returned to shore with barely a splash. The princess stepped onto the dock, her feet steady, her heart quieter. The harbor slept around her. The lanterns swayed, and somewhere a gull cried once before vanishing into the sky. She turned to look back. The woman was already rowing out again, the boat drifting like a question with no need for an answer. And the river kept whispering long after she was gone. The moon had grown fuller since her first night beyond the palace gate. Its light followed her now like a friend, not glaring, but steady, familiar. That evening, she chose a path she'd never taken before, a narrow one, trailing behind a field of lavender and into the woods beyond the eastern ridge. The trees were tall and close together, their trunks pale as old parchment. The forest was quiet, not in a lonely way, but in the way of places that listened more than they spoke. Twigs snapped softly underfoot. Owls blinked from their high perches. She walked deeper, her breath slower now with each step, as though the forest itself were teaching her how to be still. Then she saw it, tucked between the roots of two ancient trees, a cottage no larger than a carriage, its walls made of mossy stone, and its roof heavy with vines. There was no chimney smoke. There was no sign of anyone nearby, but the lantern beside the door was lit, casting a warm gold glow that pooled like honey on the leaves. Carved above the door in fading letters was a single word: library. The princess tilted her head, curious. She stepped forward and gently opened the door. Inside, the air smelled of ink, dust, and something softer. Lavender, perhaps, or old wood warmed by candlelight. Shelves gently filled every wall, lined with books of all shapes and colors. Some leaned against one another like dozing companions. Others rested in stacks as if mid-conversation. And in the center of the room sat a woman, curled in an armchair, a thick wool shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was silver and soft, her glasses slipping down her nose as she turned a page. Without looking up, she said, "You can sit anywhere you like, dear. Quiet's the only rule." The princess stood still for a moment, her heart suddenly full of something she couldn't name. Then she moved to a worn armchair across from the woman and sat. It sighed beneath her weight, welcoming. She reached for a book, its spine faded, its cover soft with wear, and opened it slowly. The story was about a girl who lived among wolves and never learned to speak their language, but still came to understand them. Each page felt like a breath. The words drifted gently through her mind, not demanding to be remembered, just willing to be felt. The old woman looked up after a while. "You've got a thoughtful silence," she said, kindly. The princess smiled. "I didn't know stories could feel this quiet." "Oh, the right ones don't shout," the woman replied, setting her book down. "They come to sit with you like old friends. They wait." The candle light flickered. Somewhere outside, a bird called once, then fell silent again. "People always think libraries are for answers," the woman said, "but they're just as good at holding questions." The princess closed her book, resting her hand on its cover. "May I come again?" "You're already part of the story now," the woman said with a smile. "Of course you may." When the princess stepped back into the woods, the air was cooler, but the chill didn't reach her skin. She held the memory of paper and soft voices, the weight of old stories warming her from within. And that night, as she returned to the palace through the secret gate, she carried no book in her hands, but she carried one open in her heart. The following night arrived with a restless breeze. It was a windier night than most. The stars blinked through swiftly moving clouds, and the trees whispered to each other with restless leaves. The princess pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders. As she slipped through the hidden palace gate once more, her steps felt instinctual now, like part of a secret rhythm only she could hear. Tonight she walked toward the cliffs. The path was narrow and quiet, winding through a sparse grove of crooked pines. Beyond them, the land dropped suddenly into a great sweeping view of the valley below. A patchwork of fields and rivers sleeping beneath a silver sky. And along the cliff's edge, like pearls on a dark thread, small lanterns glowed. She followed them one by one until she saw him, an old man in a weathered cloak, kneeling by a lantern that had just gone out. He held a flint in one hand, a fresh wick in the other. A satchel of matches hung from his belt. When he heard her approach, he looked up and gave a soft grunt of surprise. "Didn't hear you," he said. "You walk quiet." "I didn't mean to startle you," she replied. "No harm done," he said, striking the flint again. "Just relighting the lost ones." "The lost ones?" He nodded toward the unlit lantern. "People get turned around up here in the dark. Especially when the fog rolls in, these lights lead them back to the road." The princess stepped closer, watching as the flame caught and bloomed inside the glass. "Do many people get lost?" she asked. The man stood with a wince and rubbed his back. "More than you'd think, not just travelers either. Grief can take your sense of direction, so can fear or loneliness." She looked out over the valley. The lanterns shimmered like stars that had come to rest on Earth. "And you do this every night?" "Most nights," he said. "There's peace in it, and a kind of purpose. I like the idea that someone I'll never meet might find their way home because of one small light I left behind." She was quiet a moment. Then she asked, "Have you ever been lost?" The man chuckled low. "Once or twice, but I've learned that it's not about always knowing where you're going. It's about noticing the things that help you remember who you are." He handed her a match and pointed to the next lantern. "Go on if you like. Help me light the way." Her fingers curled around the tiny stick of sulfur and wood. She struck it carefully and touched the flame to the wick. It sputtered, then caught, the soft orange glow dancing within the glass. They moved along the path together, lighting one lantern after another until the whole ridge shimmered with gentle fire. And as the last one flared to life, the wind slowed, the clouds parted, and the princess realized the ache in her chest, that quiet, nightly weight, had become something else entirely. Not a wound, not a hollow, but a lantern, lit from within. The 8th night was warmer, though the stars shimmered like frost. A hush had settled over the palace as usual. Velvet and gold tucked into corners, servants vanished into shadows. But something stirred in the princess. Not restlessness, not ache, but a strange sense of anticipation, as if the night itself had been waiting for her. She left as she always did, through the forgotten gate and down the winding road. But this time, her feet turned toward the old city market, the square, usually bustling with color and commotion, had fallen into stillness. Stalls were empty, shutters drawn, but in the very center a single booth remained, draped in midnight blue cloth, lit by glass lanterns that glowed like captive fireflies. It hadn't been there before. The merchant behind it wore a robe stitched with silver thread and a hat shaped like a crescent moon. They had a voice like dusk, neither male nor female, soft and ageless. "Looking for something?" the merchant asked. The princess hesitated. "I don't know." The merchant nodded, as if this answer pleased them. That's when the best things are found. On the table lay many objects: a compass with no needle, a jar of caught starlight, a violin with a single string. But it was the mirror that caught her eye. Oval, rimmed in dark wood, its surface dim but deep. She gently picked it up. At first she saw only shadow. Then slowly the glass cleared, and she saw herself, but not in royal silk, not with a tiara or a guarded smile. She saw herself kneeling beside a fox, sitting in a bakery, laughing with flour on her sleeves, rocking on a boat beneath a pearl-colored moon, lighting lanterns on a cliff's edge with wind in her hair. She saw herself as no one in the palace had ever seen her, not polished, but real, alive. The princess set the mirror down gently. Her chest ached, not with sorrow, but with recognition. "Keep it," the merchant said quietly. "It only shows what's already there." She nodded. "Thank you." The merchant smiled. "We trade in truth here. Yours will serve you well." She walked away without asking their name. Behind her, the market faded into stillness once more, the booth dissolving like mist as dawn stirred on the horizon. And in the pocket of her cloak, the mirror pulsed softly, not with magic, but with memory. The wind next night was gentle and warm, carrying the scent of moss and distant rain. The moon hung low and golden, like an old coin tossed into the sky and forgotten. The princess wandered farther than before, beyond the harbor, beyond the hills, until she came to a grove of trees older than anything she had ever seen. They rose like pillars in a forest temple, their bark silvered with age, their branches heavy with leaves that barely stirred. The air here was different, deeper somehow, as though it held secrets in its roots. She paused at the edge of the grove, unsure if she should enter. But then, drifting through the stillness, came a sound, music, not loud or commanding, just a soft, steady melody, like breath turned into sound. She stepped carefully between the trees, her feet brushing over roots and fallen leaves, drawn toward the music as if following a dream. And there, in a clearing bathed in moonlight, sat a figure with a small wooden instrument, part harp, part lute, nestled in their lap. They were older, wrapped in a patchwork cloak, their hair falling in silver strands to their shoulders. Their eyes were closed, their fingers moved gently over the strings, plucking out notes that shimmered in the air. The trees responded. Their leaves rustled in time. Their trunks creaked ever so slightly, and the wind moved not through them but with them, as though the grove itself were listening, singing. The princess stood still, afraid to break the spell. "You can sit," the musicians said without opening their eyes. "They like company." She lowered herself onto a mossy rock, her heart slowing. The music was simple, but full. Every note, a quiet thread weaving something larger, something older. "They're asleep," the musician said, "but not deaf." "The trees?" she asked softly. "Of course. Don't you sleep with your ears open?" She smiled faintly. "Not lately. They've been dreaming of your steps for nights now. Some trees hear everything, especially the ones that grow near longing." The music shifted, slower now, almost like a lullaby. "They don't speak with words," the musician added, "but they hum when they're content. Listen closely." The princess closed her eyes, and she heard it. Not sound exactly, but vibrations, soft, deep, steady, like the earth itself breathing beneath her. It was the hum of bark, of roots stretching underground, of sap moving through ancient veins. It wrapped around her like a song she'd known before birth. Her shoulders eased, her jaw unclenched. She let the music of strings and leaves and time carry her inward like a boat on a river no one could see. After a long while, the musicians stopped playing, but the forest kept singing. When the princess opened her eyes, the clearing shimmered with quiet. "You carried too many silences," the musician said. "It's good you're letting some of them out." She didn't ask how they knew. She simply nodded. As she rose to leave, the musician handed her a small wooden charm shaped like a leaf. "For when you forget how to listen." She tucked it into her cloak, and as she stepped back through the grove, she felt the trees behind her still humming, not with words, not with warning, but with peace. And for the first time since childhood, the silence within her no longer felt lonely. It felt shared. The 10th night was different, not quieter, not louder, but full, as if all the places she'd wandered, all the people she'd met, and all the hush between them had followed her home. She left the palace again, as she always had, through the secret gate beneath the stars. But now, her steps were not led by ache or confusion. They were led by rhythm. A rhythm she had found in bread dough and boat oars, fox fur and flickering lanterns, in old music and soft-spoken truths. She did not know where she was going, and yet she knew. The sky above was indigo, the stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. The fields glowed silver with dew. She walked past the bakery, windows dark now, but fragrant with memory, past the harbor where a boat bobbed gently, waiting for the tide. Eventually she came to a hill she'd never climbed before. It was not remarkable, just a rise in the earth, crowned with wildflowers and a crooked tree, but something in it called to her. She climbed slowly, breath deepening, the wind lifting strands of her hair. At the top, she sat down in the grass. The whole kingdom spread out below, rivers winding like ribbons, the city glowing faintly, farms and forests folded like a patchwork quilt. The palace itself, once her entire world, looks small now, beautiful, but no longer the center of everything. The princess calmly lay back in the grass. She looked up. The stars blinked slowly above her. The wind carried no questions, no weight, just coolness, just space, just quiet. And into that quiet, something shifted, not loudly, not suddenly, just gently. Her eyes grew heavy. The sky didn't change. The grass didn't speak. The wind didn't hush her to sleep. But something within her softened at last. The lantern inside her, lit one night at a time, had grown full enough to glow without fear, without question. And in the quiet arms of that gentle hill, she closed her eyes and dreamed, not of thrones, not of ceilings painted gold, but of a fox's eyes and flower-covered hands, and a song sung by trees, a dream stitched from the simple things that had always been waiting, just beyond the gate. And below, in the waking world, a soft breeze rustled the grass where the princess slept. Still at last, home, not in a palace, but in herself. I hope you enjoyed tonight's journey, and it has brought you a night of peaceful, restful sleep. Please join me again tomorrow night for another sleep story. Until then, sweet dreams.